Officer Daniel Reyes had always dreamed of serving in the police force, but it was his partnership with Rex, a German shepherd, that would define his career. From the moment they met, it was clear that this wasn't just another handler-dog relationship. It was something more profound. Rex wasn't just a tool for Daniel. He was a teammate, a friend, and a protector. Daniel had been assigned to the K9 unit fresh out of the academy. Rex was a young German shepherd with sleek fur that shone in the sunlight and piercing eyes that seemed to see right through people. He was full of energy and drive, his every movement precise and confident. But what made Rex special wasn't just his physical abilities, it was his instincts. He could sense things that others couldn't, things that even Daniel wasn't aware of at times. Their training was grueling. The heat, the long hours, and the relentless pace could have broken a lesser bond, but not theirs. Daniel and Rex grew inseparable, working side by side every day, each learning to rely on the other's strengths. Where Daniel's human perception fell short, Rex's sharp senses picked up the slack. And where Rex's training sometimes needed human guidance, Daniel's calm presence was always there to reassure him. Together, they were unstoppable. It wasn't long before they became known for their remarkable success rate in the field. From tracking down missing persons to sniffing out dangerous drugs and explosives, Rex and Daniel made an incredible team. There was a rhythm to their work. Rex would do his job, and Daniel would follow his lead, trusting the dog's instincts completely. The connection between them grew so deep that it was hard for anyone to separate where one ended and the other began. They weren't just a K9 unit, they were a single, unstoppable force. And when the day was done, it didn't end with the job. Rex was more than just a colleague. He was a constant companion. Daniel would often take Rex on long walks in the park or sit with him on the porch, the two of them enjoying the simple moments of life outside of work. It was in those quiet, peaceful times that Daniel realized how much he had come to depend on Rex, not just for his incredible skills, but for the unwavering loyalty the dog offered. Their bond became something beyond professional. It was personal. Rex was not just a dog, he was family. And in Daniel's eyes, there was nothing Rex couldn't do. It was the start of something beautiful, an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of duty and tested by time. But no one could have predicted that their partnership would be put to the ultimate test in a way neither of them could ever have imagined. It was a late evening when the call came in. The team was gearing up for a routine operation, a suspected drug deal going down in a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Daniel and Rex had been on plenty of these calls before, and while each one carried risks, they had learned to trust their training and instincts. This would be no different, or so they thought. As the team approached the warehouse, the tension in the air was palpable. Daniel could feel Rex's muscles tense beneath his hand as the dog stood alert, scanning the surroundings. They had been through this drill many times before, and each time, the connection between them deepened. Rex knew exactly what was expected, and Daniel knew how to read the subtle shifts in the dog's behavior. The plan was simple: move in, secure the area, and apprehend the suspects. Rex's keen nose would sniff out any hidden contraband, and Daniel would handle the situation with his team. But as they entered the building, everything unraveled in a split second. Suddenly, the door they had been approaching burst open, and a barrage of gunfire rang out. Chaos erupted in the darkened warehouse. Daniel's heart pounded as he dove for cover, instinctively pulling Rex with him. In the chaos, a suspect, armed and desperate, fired a round directly at Daniel. Rex reacted instantly, pushing Daniel out of the way and taking the bullet intended for his handler. Time seemed to freeze as Daniel watched Rex stagger and fall, a sharp cry escaping from the dog's throat. The world around him became a blur of gunshots and shouting voices, but all Daniel could focus on was Rex. His mind raced. He had to get to him, but first, he had to stay alive. With his heart in his throat, Daniel signaled for backup and moved toward Rex. Blood soaked into the dog's fur as Daniel knelt beside him, calling out his name. Rex's eyes were wide, filled with confusion and pain, but there was something else there too, something familiar. It was as if the dog was trying to reassure him, trying to tell him that he was okay. But Daniel knew better. The injury was severe. Rex had saved his life, but in doing so, he had paid a heavy price. As the team rushed in and secured the area, Daniel cradled Rex in his arms, his mind screaming in desperation. There was no time to waste. They needed to get him to the vet fast. The journey to the hospital felt like an eternity. Daniel's heart was in his throat, his hands shaking as he held Rex close, whispering comforting words that he wasn't sure would reach the dog. All he could do was pray. Pray that Rex would pull through, that his brave partner would survive this. The thought of losing him was too much to bear. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits, sleepless nights, and medical procedures. Rex had survived the surgery, but it was clear that his injuries were severe. The bullet had struck deep, damaging vital muscles and tissues that could never fully heal. The doctor's prognosis was grim. Rex would need extensive rehabilitation, but his career in the K-9 unit was over. The department made it clear, no matter how much Daniel fought for it, Rex would be retired. Daniel couldn't accept it. He argued with supervisors, with department officials, with anyone who would listen. Rex had given everything to protect him. He had saved his life. How could they take him away now, when he needed Daniel more than ever? But the decision was final. Rex was retired from active duty, and soon he would be placed in a new home, one that wasn't Daniel's. The night Rex was officially retired, Daniel stood by the dog's side, his heart heavy with sorrow. Rex had been there for him through everything, through every mission, every challenge, every long shift. The bond they shared was deeper than mere duty. It was a connection forged in blood, sweat, and shared experience. Rex wasn't just a dog to him, he was family. And yet here they were, standing in the cold, sterile hospital room with no choice but to say goodbye. Daniel knelt beside Rex, his hands shaking as he ran his fingers through the dog's fur. "I'll miss you, buddy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Rex looked up at him, his eyes still full of trust and love, as if he didn't fully understand why this was happening. His tail wagged weakly, but there was a sadness in his gaze that cut through Daniel like a knife. The worst part wasn't just the separation, it was the uncertainty. Daniel didn't know where Rex would go, who would take care of him, or if he would ever see him again. He had no control over the situation, no way to fix it. All he could do was watch as the dog he had fought beside, protected, and loved was taken from him. When the time came to leave the hospital, Daniel stood in the doorway, one last look at Rex in the kennel. His partner, his best friend, was being taken away, and there was nothing he could do. He had given everything to protect Rex, but now he couldn't even protect the dog from this cruel twist of fate. As the door closed behind him, Daniel's heart broke. He couldn't understand why life had to be so unfair, why a bond like theirs had to end like this. But one thing was certain, he would never forget Rex. No matter where he went, no matter what happened, Rex would always be in his heart. The years after Rex's retirement were harder than Daniel ever expected. Though he threw himself into his work, each day felt incomplete. He had transferred to a new precinct, hoping that a change of scenery would help him move forward. But the truth was, Daniel's mind was never fully in the job. No matter how many cases he handled, no matter how many new K-9 partners he worked with, no one could fill the void left by Rex. The new dogs were talented, skilled in their own ways, but there was something missing. None of them had the same bond with Daniel. None of them knew him like Rex did, knew when to push him and when to hold back, when to bark out orders and when to offer quiet companionship. He had tried to form connections with the new dogs, but it just wasn't the same. It wasn't Rex. At home, the reminders were everywhere. Rex's old collar still hung by the door, gathering dust. His favorite toy, the one with the squeaker, lay abandoned in the corner of the living room. Daniel couldn't bring himself to put them away, not yet. There were too many memories attached to them, too many moments when Rex had been his constant companion. He would often find himself staring at those items, lost in thoughts of the past. In the quiet moments, Daniel's mind would drift back to that night, the night everything changed. He could still see Rex's eyes as he took the bullet, could still hear the dog's frantic whimper as he was rushed to the hospital. And he could never shake the feeling of helplessness, of being unable to do more for the dog who had given everything to protect him. Even now, 3 years later, the weight of that memory pressed down on him. He tried not to think about what happened to Rex after he was retired. It wasn't like he could keep in contact with the family who had adopted him. The paperwork had been filed, and the dog was no longer part of the force. Daniel respected that. He had to for Rex's sake. But the not knowing, the wondering where Rex was and how he was doing, gnawed at him every day. Still, life went on. Daniel continued to work long hours, dealing with crime and chasing leads. He built a life around the precinct, but the emptiness was always there. He had moments of happiness, yes, new friends, new cases, new challenges, but none of it ever felt as fulfilling as those days with Rex by his side. Nothing could replace the dog who had been more than a partner. Rex had been family, and the loss left an ache that no one and nothing could heal. But Daniel held on to hope, no matter how small it was. He never fully gave up the thought that one day, somehow, they would find each other again. He had to believe it for his own peace of mind. But little did he know, the universe had a different plan in store for him. A plan that would change everything. It was an ordinary afternoon when the phone call came. Daniel had just finished a long shift and was sitting in his car, ready to head home. The sun had already begun to set, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. His mind was heavy with the usual thoughts, cases he hadn't closed, files he needed to review, and, as always, Rex. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was an unfamiliar number, but something about the timing made him pick it up anyway. "Hello?" Daniel answered, his voice tired but alert. "Is this Officer Daniel Reyes?" The voice on the other end was calm, but there was a certain urgency beneath it. "Yes, it is," Daniel replied, a flicker of unease growing in his chest. "Who's this?" "My name is Linda. I'm calling from the Greenfield Animal Shelter. We've got a German Shepherd here with a microchip registered under your name. We believe he may be your dog." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the stomach. His heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, the world around him seemed to freeze. His breath caught in his throat. It couldn't be. There was no way. "Are you sure?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking despite his attempt to remain calm. "We've confirmed the microchip. The dog's name is Rex, right? We've been trying to get in touch with you for the past couple of days." Rex. The name rang in Daniel's ears, and he couldn't stop the flood of emotions that overtook him. After all this time, after all the years of wondering where Rex was it really him? Could it really be the same dog he'd said goodbye to all those years ago? "I'll be there as soon as possible," Daniel said, his voice steadying, but his heart was already racing. He didn't wait for another word. He hung up and started the car, the engine roaring to life as he sped toward the shelter. The drive felt like an eternity. The familiar streets that once felt so ordinary now seemed to blur into one long stretch of hope and doubt. Was it really Rex? Could it truly be him after all this time? Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white as the thought of seeing his old partner again overwhelmed him. He didn't care about the details. He didn't care about how or why Rex had ended up in a shelter. What mattered was that there was a chance, however slim, that they could be reunited. As he pulled into the parking lot of the shelter, Daniel's heart pounded louder in his chest. He had to see it for himself. He had to know if it was real. When he stepped inside the shelter, the air felt thick with anticipation. He was led down a narrow hallway to a small kennel at the back. The door creaked open, and there, standing in the corner, was a German Shepherd. His fur was graying, his face older, but Daniel knew immediately. "Rex," Daniel whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The dog's head snapped up and their eyes met, just for a second. But in that moment, it was as if time itself had stopped. The room seemed to disappear as Daniel's gaze locked with Rex. The dog's fur had grayed at the edges, and his body was a little slower, his steps less sure. But those eyes, those familiar, soulful eyes, were the same. Rex's gaze pierced through the years, through the silence, as if no time had passed at all. And for a brief moment, Daniel forgot to breathe. Rex's tail, once so strong and powerful, wagged weakly but excitedly, a soft thump against the metal bars of the kennel. Daniel felt his heart lurch. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Rex, his partner, his friend, the dog who had once saved his life, was standing before him, despite all odds. "Rex," Daniel whispered again, his voice breaking. He took a hesitant step forward, unsure if the dog would remember him, unsure if he would respond in the same way. His breath was shallow, his chest tight with emotion, but he couldn't take his eyes off the dog. "Is it really you?" Rex's ears perked up at the sound of Daniel's voice, and he let out a quiet, tentative bark, his tail wagging faster now. It was a sound Daniel recognized all too well, the bark of a dog who had found his handler, his companion, his home. The same bark that had filled the air during countless missions, and now, after all this time, it was as if nothing had changed. Daniel knelt slowly, his knees creaking as he lowered himself to Rex's level. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he reached through the bars, his hand trembling. For a moment, Rex just stood there watching him before he took a tentative step forward. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, Rex rushed forward, pressing his head against Daniel's hand. The contact was electric. It was a jolt of warmth, of comfort, of connection. Daniel let out a shaky breath as he stroked Rex's fur, feeling the familiar texture beneath his fingers. It was as if the years between them hadn't existed. It didn't matter that Rex was older or that his body had slowed. This was the same dog, the same partner who had stood by him through everything. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as he whispered, "I thought I lost you, buddy. I thought I'd never see you again." Rex nudged his face into Daniel's palm, a soft whimper escaping his throat. It was a sound that told Daniel everything he needed to know. Rex remembered. Rex remembered their bond. Rex remembered him. The shelter staff watched in silence, their eyes wide as the reunion unfolded before them. It was a rare and beautiful moment, one that was as heartwarming as it was profound. Daniel could feel the weight of the years lifting from his shoulders as he continued to pet Rex, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. There were no words that could adequately express what he was feeling, just the simple, powerful truth that his partner had come back to him. For a moment, there was only Rex and Daniel together again, and that was all that mattered. As Daniel continued to stroke Rex's head, something remarkable happened, something that neither he nor the shelter staff could have expected. Rex, with his graying fur and slow, deliberate movements, stepped back slightly, then looked directly at Daniel. His body seemed to tense with purpose, his eyes locking onto his handler's face with an intensity that Daniel hadn't seen in years. Then, without warning, Rex raised his right paw. It was subtle at first, the movement slow and deliberate, but it was unmistakable. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. That paw lift, it was a gesture so familiar, so ingrained in their bond. It was the signal Rex had always made before a mission, a quiet and intentional gesture that said, "I'm ready, I'm with you." The room went completely still. The shelter staff, who had been watching the reunion with quiet interest, now exchanged shocked glances. The bond between Daniel and Rex had been a thing of legend in the K-9 unit, but to see this kind of instinctual response after 3 years apart was beyond anything they could have imagined. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as he sank down onto the floor beside Rex, his heart full. "You remember?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He could hardly believe it. How had Rex remembered such a small, intimate gesture, one that was only shared between the two of them on countless missions? But there it was, clear as day. Rex had remembered everything. The shelter workers, still standing nearby, were visibly moved by the display. They had seen many dogs come and go, but nothing like this. They had never witnessed a reunion quite so raw, so full of love and recognition. The sight of Rex lifting his paw, a gesture that symbolized so much more than just obedience, was a testament to the deep, unbreakable connection that Daniel and Rex had shared. With trembling hands, Daniel reached down and gently grasped Rex's paw, holding it in his own. "You don't have to be ready anymore, buddy," he said softly, a chuckle escaping him despite the tears. We're together now, and I'll never let you go." Rex let out a soft whimper, as if he understood every word. His tail wagged gently, the old but familiar rhythm of trust and love. And in that moment, Daniel realized that Rex had never truly left him. Even after all this time, the bond they shared had remained untouched by distance, by time, or by the years they had spent apart. The shelter staff stood by, moved to tears by the powerful display of loyalty and connection. They had expected a reunion, but not like this. Not one that transcended time and space, that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. The room was quiet now, save for the soft sound of Rex's breathing and Daniel's shaky sighs. In that moment, Daniel knew, no matter what had happened in the past, no matter how far apart they had been, Rex was back, and nothing could ever take him away again. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly began to return to a new normal for Daniel and Rex. The reunion had brought with it a renewed sense of purpose for both of them. Rex, though older and a little slower, had found a new rhythm in his life, one that no longer involved the constant demands of active duty, but still carried the love and loyalty he had always known. Daniel couldn't help but marvel at how effortlessly Rex had adjusted to his new life. They spent their days together, just like they had before, but this time there was no pressure of work weighing them down. They took long walks in the park, the two of them side by side, sharing quiet moments of peace. Daniel would often laugh as Rex wandered around, sniffing at trees and chasing after stray squirrels just like any dog would. It was a simple life now, but it was a good one. The old bond between them had never faded. It was as if the years apart had only made their connection stronger. Daniel often found himself lost in thought as he watched Rex sleep at his feet, remembering all the times they had shared during their service. He knew deep down that he would never have a partner like Rex again. They had been through so much together, and what they had was something rare, a connection that could not be replicated. But despite the peace they had now, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that their story wasn't over yet. There was something unspoken between them, a sense that Rex had returned for a reason. As the weeks passed, Daniel began to see subtle signs that the old instincts were still there. Rex would react to loud noises, alert and sharp, as though on the lookout for something. He would raise his head at odd times, scanning the room with a knowing expression, as if he was waiting for the next call. One afternoon, as Daniel was cleaning out the garage, he heard a familiar sound, a distant siren. Rex, who had been lying quietly on the porch, suddenly stood up, his ears perked and his eyes fixed on the horizon. Without hesitation, he padded over to Daniel, his gaze intense. Daniel paused, wiping his hands on a rag, and looked down at his partner. "Ready, boy?" he asked softly. Rex's tail wagged once, firm and determined. The old spark was still there. It was as if Rex had been waiting for the right moment, waiting for Daniel to need him once again. In that instant, Daniel knew that Rex was not just his past. He was his present, and together, they still had much to offer the world. With a newfound sense of purpose, Daniel grabbed Rex's leash and clipped it to his collar, his heart swelling with pride. They may have been through hell and back, but they had never truly been apart. The bond between them was unbreakable, and nothing, not time, not distance, not even the years that had passed, could ever change that. As they walked together down the road, the sun setting behind them, Daniel couldn't help but smile. The story of their partnership wasn't finished yet. It was just beginning again in a new chapter of trust, loyalty, and love. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt whole.